What did you just tell me about this book, Billion Dollar Bullseye? What was that?
No, it's dog shit. Use it as a coaster for a cocktail.
I haven't read it yet, so hopefully this is okay. I'm just kidding.
You're better off. It'll ruin everything.
Hey, welcome back, everybody. Alex Sanfilippo, your host, and I'm joined by my good friend today, JCRON. JCRON, welcome to Podcasting Made Simple.
Oh, thanks, man. I'm excited to be here.
Man, I'm thrilled that we're finally doing this. You've spoken to my mastermind multiple times. You and I have had many conversations over the last couple of years. I was trying to remember though, man, how did we originally connect? Do you remember this or no?
That's actually a really good question, and I don't know that I do. Did you connect me with Seth, or did Seth connect me with you?
I connected you with Seth and a few other people like almost immediately, but I remember where I was. I just don't remember, but somehow I get a text from you. You're like,
We're
hey,
gonna figure this out.
yeah.
I'm literally gonna mine my email or text to answer this question because if I don't, it will take over my entire day.
Well, hopefully it doesn't end up doing that. But I just remember I got a text from you and you called yourself JCRON. And I was already like, okay, I don't know who JCRON is, but anyone who shortens their name like that has got to be pretty cool. It just so happened when you text me, I was sitting out in my car at the bank, which I have to go to the bank like twice. I shouldn't even say that, once a year, maybe. And it was something for work and they were like running 30 minutes late. So I'm like, all right, I'm sitting here. I checked my phone and you would text me. You're like, so-and-so connected us or something. And you got time for a call. And I was like, yeah, right now, do you? And you're like, yep. And so we got on a call and man, I immediately knew that you were the type of guy I wanted to be friends with. The main thing is you kind of pitched an idea to me and I straight up told you I didn't like it. And it wasn't that I was like in a bad mood. I just straight up didn't like it. And you're like, cool, I respect that. Thank you. And so I immediately tell him like, this guy's humble. He's teachable. He's just like a real authentic dude. And so I like that, man. And here's the thing. I want to get into our introduction here now. You never once mentioned a small company called Kajabi when I told you I don't like your idea, and you're like, well, I ran Kajabi, right? Listen, everyone, JCRON ran Kajabi for a while, and over a 5-year period of time, the company, I wrote this number down because I don't have it memorized, but the company grew while you were in the CEO position by 2,153% and achieved a $2 billion valuation. Man, congrats. Like,
No, thank you. It
unreal.
it was a unbelievably blessed season. I was actually the president of Kajabi. Kenny Reeder was our CEO, and he was actually the technical founder. Wrote the whole platform at night over the course of a year before releasing it. But yeah, we had an amazing time. I joined in September of 2016 as partner and president. We were about 6 million in annual recurring revenue, or ARR, for the SaaS people. And over the next 5 years, we grew to be over 400 team members, a $2 billion valuation, and a 9-figure revenue company. And it was an unbelievable season. Learned a lot, screwed up a lot, had a lot of things go our way, but so grateful for the journey and grateful I got a chance to write a book about it. And I can't wait actually to find out how we got connected because for everyone listening, feedback is one of the most valuable resources you will ever come across. And the fact that Andrew told me, excuse me, the fact that Alex told me right off the bat that he hated my idea, that's incredibly valuable, way more valuable than him telling me he liked it, me spending a bunch of money or time, only to realize that Alex was entirely right and the idea was terrible. So, I mean, did me a favor.
Yeah, I'm glad you have that perspective. Not everyone shares that, but thank you for that. Man, so again, like just learning that about you after we got off that call is like, whoa, no way. So I kind of dove into your world a lot. And fast forward just a little bit, you write this book, Billion Dollar Bullseye. And because we're friends, you sent me a copy and I agreed, yeah, I'll definitely read it. I'll check it out for you. And I kind of just figured this was gonna be a business book, right? Like I've read a lot of business books. So I started reading them. Like, he's my friend. I'm gonna give him feedback. I'm gonna go through it. I got halfway through the first point in the book, and I stopped. And I realized, you know what? There's actually something here. And I decided to stop. And I closed the book, grabbed a notepad, and then opened it back up from page 1 and started going through it. And man, more on that in a little bit here. I'll kind of share like what happened immediately. But what made you decide to write this book? And then we'll get into how it's going to be beneficial for guest and host today.
I would love to tell you that it was a really intentional journey, but I would say it was more serendipity brought about by frustration. So everyone asks after you experience something like we did at Kajabi, how did you do it? Like, how did it happen? All of those things. And my joke used to be, well, I don't really have my like 7 point, almost never fail double unicorn checklist. Like, that would be super cool if I did, but I didn't have it. And then all of a sudden, one afternoon, I'm outside my backyard and just this thing pops into my head, $1 billion bullseye. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. And I started kind of sitting with it. And then this idea of, well, the way to win at darts is not to actually be good at darts. It's to have a larger bullseye that you're throwing darts at than anybody that you're playing against. And I was like, okay, that's another indicator. And then, like any good marketer, I had to go see if the URL was available, and it was. So all of a sudden, all of these forces align that I'm like, this might be the framework that I can litmus test against what we did at Kajabi and see what comes out of it. And it turned into something that I'm extremely proud of and extremely grateful that I got to bring it to market, because it does a lot of answering that question of, if you're going to undertake any type of business, regardless of the business you're in, I wanted this to be a timeless framework. I didn't want it to be a tip, trick, hack, window of opportunity today. And so the book kind of became my view on business. And it's something that hopefully, if my daughters choose to, follow through on the world of entrepreneurship, it's like, hey, here's everything I know. It's in the book. So I'm really, really glad that it's out there. And more importantly, extremely grateful for people like you that are reading it. Like, there's not a higher compliment I could feel than somebody spending their time on things that I said.
Man, I love that. Billion dollar bullseye. How to build $1 billion business in 30 minutes or less, guaranteed. Is the tagline. I'm just
100% of the time, it works every time. Yeah,
there
absolutely.
we go. Here's the thing. I decided to narrow this down because I'm thinking like billion dollar bullseye. This is about companies that are the future Kajabi size companies, right? And like their own verticals and stuff like that. But I got so much out of this. I was like, there's got to be a way to dissect this thing and make it valuable for podcast guests and hosts who make up Podcasting Made Simple, who make up PodMatch. I was like, there's got to be a way to do this. And I pulled out 3 that I think will work really well. So I'm going to kind of let you speak mostly, but I kind of want to guide the conversation. There are 4 more, and I encourage anyone who's watching this, hearing this, and you're like, oh, what are the other 4? Later on in the conversation, I'll give you a way to check those out. And just know, even if you're not trying to build $1 billion business, what you can learn from this is extremely applicable to almost anything, I'm finding. And that's why I really want to get into this. So we're going to help podcast hosts really figure out how to hone in their podcasting craft, and guests how to have just the best episodes that really, really serve people. So I'm ready to get into this. And again, don't make my mistake by not taking notes. Get the notepad out now. Let's get started here.
Unless you're driving. If you're driving and listen to us, don't take notes while you're driving. I've tried it. It's terrible. The notes are bad and the passengers are scared.
Good point. Thanks, JCRON. Safety announcement right there. There's 7 rings in the book. As I said, we're going to get into 3 of them. And I want to go straight into this first one. Ring number 1, which is purpose. I have a lot of thoughts on this, but JCRON, talk to us about this idea of purpose and also why it's number 1.
So it's number 1 in my mind because it is where everything starts. It is the ultimate lens that, if not applied, you will make decisions that either will be incorrect or someday you will regret, because it is not judged against the criteria of why you are making those decisions. And I struggled with purpose for a long time because I felt like purpose had to be something that was shareable, that was mission, vision, values, that you could tell everyone about it. And as I looked at purpose and why I had to wrestle with it, I decided that I felt there were 2 purposes, namely your internal purpose and your external purpose. The internal purpose is the one that you don't have to share, and it doesn't need to be societally appropriate. It doesn't need to be something that you would put up on a billboard. Like in my world, early on, coming from a family where financially we were not secure, I just wanted to get rich, flat out. Like I tell everyone, I would have sold spoons door to door if the money was right. But that's hard to get people motivated around the rallying cry of JCRON wants to get rich. That's for me. That's what gets me out of bed. That's what drives me to adopt risk and take chances. Then you've got the external purpose. And you might be thinking the external purpose is going to be about your team or the company. The external purpose is about the only person that matters in that world, and that is your customer. That is what you do, for whom you do it for, and why you do it for them. That is where purpose lives, because that is the transformative impact that you're having in the world. And so to me, when I look at purpose, you got to know why you're doing it, and you got to know what you're doing and why you're doing it, for whom you're doing it. And those are the 2 things that matter the most. And when you nail those, you can't help but have it become magnetic to the people and resources that you will need to attract in your world to achieve those things.
This is an area that I realized, again, I'd opened the book, got halfway through this, and realized that me, a guy who always, listen, anyone who's heard this podcast before, heard me talk, you've heard me talk about purpose, you've heard me talk about why, getting it right, all this stuff. And I'm like halfway through and I'm like, all right, JCRON, I know this one. And I get halfway through, I'm like, shoot, I don't know this one. And that's ultimately what made me decide to stop. And I realized I was just not doing a good job displaying that external purpose very well. And for me, a lot of it actually aligns with the internal purpose as well. And I kind of felt this like this uneasiness inside of me of like, okay, this is out of alignment and I need to just stop. And I went to our about page on PodMatch, which I'd love for everyone who's watching, listening, go to podmatch.com/about, unless you're driving, as JCRON already mentioned. Go check out that page because it is a byproduct of this idea of really getting purpose right. And JCRON, you're going to love to hear this, I think. Since I did that, we've had more people than ever reach out complimenting us on the about page. But not even that, we've had people apply to work for PodMatch when we don't have anything like, there's no jobs posted anywhere. People are just like, hey, I saw this page and I want to let you know, here's my resume because I want to work for you as soon as you need something like I do. We've had like 30 people do that in just like the last little bit of time that we've had this done. We haven't never even like announced that page being finished to date, at least at the time of talking about this. But man, like, does it make a difference when you actually get this right? And that's what I want you to speak to real quick before we move on to the next point here. How do we get this right? Like, how practically can somebody that's a podcast host or guest start to get this purpose visually in front of other people that are hearing or watching them?
I am so glad to hear that you had that experience because that is exactly what that aligned leverage is meant to create. That I feel purpose gets so squishy and hard because it's like, well, how do I codify and talk about what's driving me? And how do I talk about what's driving my team? And how do I talk about what's driving my customers? And how do I fit that all together in a way that it's perfect? And the answer is when you separate it internally and externally, you don't have to. And that's where it gets so exciting that when you can find something that is relevant to the market, but so deeply personal and resonant with you, it just unlocks everything. And now all of a sudden, the team members are raising their hand and opting in, saying, I want to be part of what you're doing and what you're putting out in the world. Not, it's just a widget factory with the mission, vision, values that was done 20 years ago that nobody's looked at. So I think that the answer of how do you nail this is twofold. Number one, how do you feel? Because if you don't feel anything towards it, the I guess let's call it the kitschy way to say it is if your why doesn't make you cry, it probably doesn't matter that much. And it doesn't have to be that emotional. Like my wife will tell you, I feel like I've got two left brains. So I'm not a crazy emotional person. But if you don't care enough about it, you're not going to do what's required of you to have it be out in the world. And I would add to that that when you then begin what I call in the book purposing in public, like what Alex talked about the about page and how that has shifted, if you put your purpose out there in public and the public doesn't care, it doesn't mean that it can't still be your purpose. It just means that you have to be adult enough about it to realize that it might not be resonating the way you want it to. And if you, at that point, want to continue going through with it, you can. You just have to recognize that that is something that might not be economically viable, or it might not be having the impact that you desire to have. So those are those inflection points of if you think you're a leader, but there's nobody behind you following you, you might have to reevaluate if you're a leader or not. And this is where that idea between an artist and an entrepreneur is so critical, because an artist would say, well, I'm just going to create what I want. I don't really care if the world ever buys it because this is in me and has to come out of me. And if it doesn't resonate, it doesn't matter. And those are those podcasts that it might be about making cat mittens. And, cats don't have credit cards, so they're probably not going to buy your mittens, but that's okay because you're super pumped about cat mittens. The entrepreneur brings in an economic responsibility where it needs to resonate in a way that the business is achieving the outcomes you've set for it. So I would say the two primary indicators: does it matter to you? Does it matter to your market? And if you're seeing that, then it's a game of refining and achieving that aligned leverage.
Man, that is so good. Mic drop. We could be done right here. I know I say that, but just about anytime I talk to you, I felt like I've had that same thing. I'm like, well, thanks everyone for being here, right?
I'm so grateful because, and for those of you listening, anyone who spends time with Alex, you have to know this is a guy that comes from a service mindset, almost to a level that's frustrating to us mere mortals. Like Alex is one of the few people that sends me spontaneous text messages of just to say hi or check in or ask how life is. This is a guy that is in it for the love of the game. And you can only imagine how hard it is for anyone who knows Alex to see an about page that isn't bringing him everyone that would be passionate to align with him, because you can see the care that he has in the business. So this is less about how do we fit a mission, vision, values, how do we do the, corporately appropriate thing, and far more about how do we unlock something in you that you are so unbelievably charged up about that you can't help but bring the whole world into it. And that's really the goal. It's not about how do we gerrymander this. It's about how do we unleash what's already there.
Yeah, man. That's good. I want to move on now for sake of time, man. I feel like we could talk about just this one point, but thank you for that. It means a lot. I'm going to jump down to ring 3. This is product. And in our case, that's our podcast episodes or our guesting episodes, right? So maybe our show and the episodes that we're on as a guest. And I want to specifically kind of hone in on one part here, JCRON, that really stood out to me. And it's about the importance of talking to the people that we serve in order to get the product right. Why does this matter? Can you just kind of speak to this point? I'll let you kind of riff on this a little bit.
So to me, product is the unsung hero of any business. It is the area that is the hardest, which is why it is focused on the least. It is the area for me that is a damaging admission that what you will find in business is whatever your passion or proficiency is will ultimately become your purgatory or punishment, because it will be the distraction that takes you away from the area you should need to be focusing. And for me, my passion and proficiency was marketing. So my punishment and purgatory became product, because rather than fixing product issues, I would figure out how to market or sell more of it. And so I think as a podcast host, if I were to look at this, or a podcast guest, this is where you begin to fall in love more with your brand or your story than you do with the transformation of the people listening to your brand or story. So that means if you are a guest, but part of your journey is not how do I edify and be impactful for the host, you're going to be a very boring guest, because it's going to be all about you. It's going to be a ton of soliloquy and point back to your brand. If it's not helpful for the customer, it's not a great product. And you as the podcast host, if you're more concerned with how do I turn this into media that serves me, you're going to miss the opportunity of how that guest can serve your customer. And you're going to be approaching it with a completely different view. And what we are in today is a very unique inflection point where product in podcast, I think, is going to become critical, because the impact that the listener has is going to be everything. And if that impact is good, you don't need to gamify anything else. You don't need to worry about optimizing. You don't need to worry about keywords. You don't need to worry about all of the blocking and tackling of marketing, because if it is transformatively impactful, you will not be able to stop the world from sharing that product. And today, where content is everywhere, where the new form of content marketing, to quote Christopher Lochhead, is saying nothing on every channel, this is the opportunity to go deep and to go transformative. Not how many episodes can I have, it's how many episodes are meaningful.
This idea of transformation, making it meaningful, once again, this only happens in my mind by actually knowing what your listeners want. And I recently talked to somebody, actually, I shouldn't say somebody, this is a lot of people, so I'm not going to try to single anybody out. But I asked, people were like, hey, I want to grow my podcast, or why don't I get more leads from my podcast guesting efforts? And I always ask the same question. I'm like, okay, well, why would somebody listen to it? And JCRON, the amount of times that someone could actually give me an answer, it's few and far between is an understatement. Almost never. People are like, I'm not really sure. And to me, that's the first thing. I'm like, well, if you don't know why you would listen to it, then what are you expecting others to do? And to me, it all comes back to this idea, once again, of actually talking to the people we serve, or who you say we would ideally serve. I want to just get real practical here. How do we talk to people that we serve or apparently serve? People are always like, they're not like emailing me, they're not commenting on social media. Like, how do I find them? Do you have any thoughts around this? Because you've been part of a early stage startup. I'm sure people weren't like knocking down the door to find it first, right?
Well, I have an idea that hit me that I want to share, and then I will get into the tactical element of how do we improve it from a product lens. I think what you just said is critical as it relates to why should someone listen. And why I believe today no one can answer that is because media 20 years ago, you had to be talented to have a platform. You had to be good, and that's the only way that you got access to a platform. Today, we've almost narcissistically re-engineered this, that because everyone has global reach, you're entitled to it. And the answer is you're not. You're entitled to the access, but you're not entitled to the audience. And so if you do not have the value delivered for that audience, you won't have one. And it's a hard truth. Like, nobody wants to hear do better or be better because it sounds like work. Well, I'm on channels. Why is the audience not there? So I think that, to your point, the work is in the chopping of wood at that individual level of whoever is engaging with you, engaging to understand that that is your audience and that is their experience, and mining the value that they are getting out of interacting with you is the currency they're giving you. That they're literally, rather than thinking the world should show up because you're available, look at it as somebody is giving you real dollars. And if anything, giving you something more valuable than real dollars, because you can't get more time. You can always get more money. So that person listening to you, they might value their time at $1 an hour. They might value it at $10,000 an hour. They might value it at $1 million an hour. Who knows? But at the end of the day, if you're not producing and delivering at a level where you see someone handing you dollars that they worked for, you're not going to create an episode that you're always asking yourself, what is the outcome I want somebody to have? What is the action I want them to take? What is the transformation that, if they take those, I can confidently say this will be delivered? Because we don't need more intellectual junk food. We're all already overwhelmed by it today.
Man, that's very insightful. I've never heard it said like that before. I want to keep it going here now on the practical side, or the very actionable side. Like, how does somebody now connect with that person, would you say? Like, let's imagine there are people listening. You've got some listenership. You can see like just the numbers right now, but how do we actually connect with a human to be able to learn like what it is that we should be delivering for them?
The best resource that I can recommend on this is 1,000 True Fans. It is the ultimate Bible on how to interact with this critical few that becomes the foundation. It becomes the feedback loop for your content, and it becomes the divining rod for the transformation that they are experiencing that you then get to nail and scale. And I think that this is something that so few people really do, is it is in that magical engagement, that one-to-one element, that interacting in the comments, that doing the things that don't scale to really uncover what is the take-home value that somebody is getting. Because your audience will tell you. I think a lot of people shy away from it because they don't want to know. That comment threads can be challenging, that poor download counts can be challenging, that it might be easier to try and do it via advertising than it is to try and do it organically. But ultimately, this is what served us at Kajabi, which was doing the things that people at our stage wouldn't normally do. Like, I was the president of a 9-figure company, and I was the most active participant in our Facebook group. We had 70 plus thousand people in there. Did we have teams of community managers? Absolutely. Amazing people. Didn't mean that I didn't outperform or out interact almost every team lead that we had that worked in our social media community, because I knew that's where my customer lived. I knew that living closest to them was what I had to do to know the transformation that we were having or weren't having, and continue to calibrate accordingly to make sure we were driving it. So no matter where you are, whatever audience engagement you're getting, that is the first thing that you need to dig into deeply and amplify. And even if it's one person's enough, because they're going to give you a little bit and you do more of that. Then you get 100. Oh, you see a trend, do more of that. Now you got 10,000. Now you begin to see statistical significance about the transformation you're driving. Amplify that. And in a way, it's almost at the beginning where you might start a little bit broader to increase the surface area of content luck to find you. But the moment you find that indicator that you've struck a chord, now it's time to go really deep. Now you have found the avenue of transformation that you can refine and get better at delivering faster and faster and more predictably. And then everything explodes. Tony Robbins used to have a variety of content on everything imaginable. And now he's pretty much known as the guy that whatever you're dealing with, he solves it in 3 minutes live at a UPW, because that's his lane. So I would encourage you to continue to iterate and interact until you find your lane. And then when you do, then it's all about improving it.
Man, I really respect that you were leading the way in the charge in your Facebook group where your community was speaking with you, right? I got to write that down. That's another thing I like about JCRON. Let me write that down. The good outweighs the bad now, man. Officially. I'm just kidding.
Yes, winning.
I want to jump down to ring number 6. This is persuasion. Persuasion, I think, has like a bit of a stigma around the word. Can you first talk about what persuasion means, so we all know that it's not something icky?
Absolutely. So persuasion in my world is sales. It is the act of, and I'll describe it the way that Dan Sullivan did because I think it's the most elegant definition I've ever heard, that sales is a process of getting someone intellectually engaged in a future result that is good for them and getting them emotionally charged to take action to achieve it. And when you view persuasion through that lens, foundationally, it's got to be something that's good for them. But the moment you know that it's good for them, you have a moral and ethical responsibility to do everything possible to get them to take action on it.
You know, when I was reading through this book, I love that you talked about this idea of persuasion. Like ultimately, what it comes down to is listening. Like that is like the core skill of it is your ability to actually listen. And I think that like in that last point, we're talking about like actually talking to people that listen to your podcast. It's not so that you can preach at them and tell them this is why you should be listening more, right? Like it's not that. It's where it steps into this where you need to like step back and be like, let me hear what they're actually saying. I don't think that most people, and I think that maybe podcast guest hosts are actually better than most people at this. So I'm going to give us that benefit. But in general, people are better at talking than listening. I always say, like, and I didn't make this up, but there's a reason God gave us one mouth and two ears, right? But we've kind of flipped that a little bit. Can you talk about this idea of listening and why it matters so much?
Well, absolutely. And it's something that actually I'm still working on. Listening for me does not come naturally. It is not my strong suit. And actually, for those of you that wonder the type of feedback that Alex gives me, I'm pretty sure that after we either recorded an episode or I talked to your mastermind, you had actually shared leaving more space for the host to interact because, you know, the goal is how brief can you be while being brilliant? And that is a learned skill and it's hard to do. So when I think about listening, listening requires presence. It requires a confidence that what is being asked of you will be delivered in a way that you can deliver upon it. But it's a little bit being comfortable that you don't need to respond immediately, that you don't need to answer every question immediately. It's understanding that the people you run into and the more time you spend in this world, it seems like the people that have figured out more and have done more say a lot less. And I think it's just that maturation process, whether that is as a host, whether that is as a guest, whether that is in a sales process of persuasion, you will be remembered for the quality of the questions you ask, not so much for the volume of speaking that you do. And I think that going back to product as a podcast host and as a podcast guest, you really should have one outcome as a host or as a guest and drive everything and point all of the guns in the direction of that outcome. Our direction today is to take my book about building a business and unearth the nuances that are immediately applicable to podcast hosts and guests. And if we've done that, I would like to hear from you. And if we haven't done that, I would like Alex to hear from you. No, I'm just kidding. If we haven't done that, absolutely blow me up on any channel you can find me because it continues to be something that you're giving us your time and that's the outcome that we want to drive. And I think that this is something as well that maybe making it a little bit more accessible, going back to that product element, but bringing in an element of persuasion. If you don't have an audience, just ask anybody, ask any of your friends or family members, what problems do you come to me to solve? That's one of the most unique questions to ask somebody. Like, okay, I'm in your phone. What happens when you're like, man, I got to call Alex. I've got a problem. I've got a challenge. I've got an opportunity. So problem, challenge, opportunity, maybe problem. Let's go problem and opportunity only. If you've got a problem, when are you calling me? Or if you've got an opportunity, when are you calling me? Those then become those divining rods to find the transformative opportunity you're going to bring to your audience because it's why people are in relationship with you. And it might be because you're entertaining. It might be because you're insightful. It might be because you can cut to the core of an issue or bring simplicity out of complexity. It might be that you're incredibly innovative and you think of ways to solve problems that nobody else ever would. It's meant to be that beginning to figure out how you will then persuade people, how you will impact people, and how that transformative purpose becomes self-evident. So that would be a question that I think would be really, really helpful. And as you figure out the transformative impact, now it's your job to figure out how to persuade people more effectively to achieve that outcome.
You know, there's something you said toward the end of this chapter. This is nearing the end of the book, actually. You said at the end of the day, it comes down to us providing value for real people and that we want to serve, and just like delivering upon it, like adding that real value. And man, like it really spoke to me. It was a good reminder. Like at the end of the day, we're not trying to persuade people to do something that's unethical or get them into our, into our system. At the end of the day, like if we're reaching out for someone to listen to us on a podcast, whether we're the guest or the host, we're listening because we're like, you know what? I think this has real value for you specifically today. And I think that it really comes down to that. And I know we're nearing the end of our time together here. And so I think we covered it really well, talking about this idea of our purpose, our product, which is our podcast guesting efforts, and persuasion, where that all kind of fits in the mix. And I want to tell everyone here, like, yeah, we covered 3 of the 7. I think that all of us can find the parallels between the rest of them as well. So $1 Billion Bullseye, I encourage you to go to JCRON.com. So you can reach out to JCRON. It's also where you can grab the book. JCRON was kind enough to send me a physical copy, but I'll be real, man. I really like that you did the audiobook. So I was like, oh, I like to hear my buddy's voice. So I actually listened to the audiobook. But man, again, it's JCRON.com.
I'm honored to hear that, by the way, because to share with everybody, because again, I want to remind everyone just how flawed I am. When I was recording the audiobook, I was talking to the audio engineer and he's like, anything I can watch for in the recording of this? I was like, well, I've always hated the sound of my own voice. Like I always wanted to have like a rich, deep, timbre to my voice. And he's like, oh, well, we can go ahead and use the manly mic. And now I'm immediately offended. I'm like, well, what are you trying to say? I'm not a man? Like I'm not manly enough? Like whatever. And then sure enough, he goes to his like microphone museum case and brings out a manly microphone, MANLEY, which apparently is a microphone that makes you sound a little bit deeper of a voice. But I'm about to like light this guy up for insulting me when I'm being vulnerable. And it's the name of the microphone that I used to record the book. So if you listen to the audiobook and you wonder why I don't sound as manly, it's because I'm not on the manly microphone.
I don't have any comment to that, man. But hey, everybody, jcron.com, check it out. Before we let you go, man, do you have any final thought, words of wisdom, anything like that you want to share with the audience today?
Absolutely. Anybody listening to this that wants to share the gift that you have with the world, please stay close to Alex and please stay the course. I believe that with this AI revolution we are all looking at, authenticity is going to be a very real currency. That it doesn't matter that AI can tell me how I can lose weight. AI's never been fat, so I'm not going to trust it because it hasn't had a human experience. This is going to be a season where the world is going to need more creators that are more passionate about what they do as we move into the next iteration of misinformation and disinformation being prevalent everywhere. So please, please, please continue to follow your path. There's people out there that need to hear from you, and you have a global audience available at your fingertips. It just means that you have to put a little bit more thought into those people paying you with their time and attention, and how you can be transformatively impactful in their life. But thank you for listening. Thank you for giving us your time. And if you got to this far and you didn't get any value out of it, you should blow me up on any social channel you can, and I will make sure to provide some level of insight for the time that you've spent with us today. I don't know how I will, because this is the best I got, but I promise you I will take it seriously and figure out how to do it.
And JCRON, you're awesome, man. Thank you again for being here. I really appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Alex.